Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another edition of Quarantine Coaching Conversations. I'm Coach Gene Clemens. I am here with, a guy that feels like a nephew to me, a little brother, Coach Nick Marcella, offensive coordinator at RPI. Coach Marcella, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me on, Coach Clemens. Really excited to be talking to you.
Yeah, and I'm extra excited to be talking to you because for people who don't know out there, I coached with Nick's father, the original Marcella, if you will, and anybody who knows football in the Northeast, they've heard of Rick Marcella. He's been around the game forever. Head football coach at British Academy. If you have a school in the Northeast, there's a better than likely chance that you either currently have a British Academy player on it, or you've had a British Academy player on it over the last, let's say, 30 years now. And so, Nick, obviously being a direct descendant of, the son of Rick, it's only right that he ended up being a coach, and I can't be any more ecstatic about it. I was actually talking to Rick the other day, and I said, man, it's crazy because when I first met Nick, I didn't think coach. Like I didn't even know if you were going to play football at that time when I first met you. And he made a very good observation, a very good note that I remember a lot. You've always been a meticulous guy. Like you've always been about organization and, making sure things were done in the manner that they should be done. And really that's, a lot of that is just what coaching is. And so it's really awesome that you've blazed this path and that you are, in the fraternity. We're proud to have you. I know that the young men are fortunate to have a coach like you, and I'm really, really interested to talk some D3 football today. So if you guys don't know, we're going to be talking about Division III football and a lot of the things that come along with D3 football. And so I thought Nick would be a great guy to have on because he's in it, but then he's also grown up in a world where he's seen kind of the business of how things are different for Division III coaches. And so we're going to talk about that today. Nick, why don't you start off and just kind of tell us about your journey from where you came from up in British Maine, growing up in that environment, to how you got to be the offensive coordinator at RPI so quickly. You're still such a young dude.
Yes, sir. So I'm from Bridgeton, Maine, a town with one street light. It recently got another street light in there, across from a McDonald's. So now we're kind of a bustling metropolis. I played at Lake Region High School, probably one of the worst high school programs in the entire country. At the time, it was really, really bad football, not a ton of support, not a lot of resources, and not a lot of good athletes, especially when you're looking at me leading the team. I was fortunate enough to play a postgraduate year at British Academy, like Coach Clemens mentioned, and the football is a lot different there. I got to play with Division I guys, got to experience that type of environment. Ended up walking on at a Division II program at St. Anselm College in Manchester, New Hampshire. Really, really good experience there. I got to play with the big boys and eventually earn my way up to in my 5th year being captain of the team. And we went 6-5 that year, which was the winningest year in school history. So that ended up being a really, really good experience. I had one semester where I worked with my dad at another prep school, New Hampton. It was a spring semester. And in that time, I sent 358 emails out to various college programs across the country. I got 6 responses and 1 interview at RPI in Troy, New York, probably the only school in the country that didn't have a connection to my father. Got an interview there, worked up as a part-time coach, was part-time for 2 years, was an intern for another year, and got lucky enough where I became the offensive coordinator in the 3rd year. Coach Clemens asked kind of how did that happen? I would honestly say that stamina. I was the last one there. A couple guys left before, and I was there to fill that hole. to be honest with you. I was very, very lucky. I love where I coach. I love what I do. And hopefully I can keep some of the success going that we've had.
That's awesome. And you know, a lot of what we do in coaching, a lot of times it's last man standing or who's still around. I know of guys who started off as GAs and made their way to head coach in like 5 years just because they were a GA and then the head coach left and the OC took over, and then the OC promoted them from GA to, you know, position coach. And then the OC underneath that new head coach left. And so that guy got promoted to an offensive coordinator, and then the head coach leaves and they're like, oh, well, we're scrambling. And so that guy gets a head coaching job. Do you feel like at some level, you know, you had to make sure that even though this is an opportunity and I'm not going to turn down that opportunity, I need to make sure I'm actually prepared to, you know, function at this level, because there's a lot more that goes into your daily preparation when you're an offensive coordinator versus a position coach.
Absolutely. I know it might be cliche, but I'm a firm believer in the fact they say that nobody is ever ready for their next job. It doesn't matter how prepared you can be. I'm also a firm believer that the phrase hard work pays off isn't always true, but hard work always puts you into that situation where you're going to be in a spot where you have the biggest ability to succeed. So it's going to put you in a position where you go. So even as a part-time guy, I would prepare myself like a coordinator. I would sit with our head coach who was calling the plays. I would see why he was doing what he was doing and what I would do in that situation, and be able to have that conversation to prepare myself as ready as you can be. But you're right. I mean, it's definitely a whole different world in the big chair.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And so what are some of the things that you feel like you really want to put as your thumbprint on the offense? Like, because everybody always has their thing. When I get a chance to run an offense, this is what I want to do. What's going to be that signature or that calling card from a Nick Marcella offense?
For me, it's going to be streamlined communication in how we call and how we get the information to the kids and what they know. So I know for a fact that there's a lot better football minds out there than me. I think there's probably even better DCs in our league than I am an OC. So the one thing that I know that I can control, and the thing that I want to be the best at, is I want to communicate. I want to be on the same page, and I want everybody to do it in a really, really efficient manner. I want it crammed down.
No, that's awesome. And I would say, you know, don't sell yourself short. Like, there are a lot of people who end up in positions that are not prepared, you know, for those positions, and they don't prepare well. They get there and they go, okay, I'm here, but then they're still looking at the game from a position coach's standpoint. And as you grow in position, when you go to a coordinator, you can no longer look at the game from a one position, you know, situation. And the same with the head coach. You have to have a focus on the entire game and how everything affects you as you go along. I want to transition and talk some about Division III in particular, and the unique situations that Division III programs deal with that you don't necessarily have to deal with as much on a Division II or Division I level, because of the restrictions when it comes to transferring and things of that nature. So talk to us a little bit about some of those things that make Division III a unique experience to coach at.
Yeah, so Division III, I'd say, like, you know, one of the bigger differences is kind of the lack of access to the kids that you're going to have. In the fall season, you run into that with not having your entire team at practice. You say there's a class at 4 o'clock, that's the only time in which it's offered. The guys are going to be at that class instead of your practice. And then in the spring, you know, you're not allowed to monitor your athletes in the weight room. So you can't have an attendance because you run into NCAA compliance. Technically, everything is voluntary. So with that, you kind of have that lack of control, which, you know, as a coach is, you know, you're kind of like your worst nightmare. So a little bit of that is really kind of I would say the downside or the different side. The positive side to me, the most positive thing about coaching Division III kids is that they appreciate what you're doing. They're not going to talk back to you in a negative way. They're happy to be there and they're happy to receive instruction. They know it's a negative when you're not talking to them as opposed to when you are talking to them.
No, that's good. I also think there's another part, and I talk about this a lot in the high school game, is the idea of missing the sport. Because there's less going on in the off season when it comes to Division III football, the players really get an opportunity to miss being out there, to miss being a football player. Whereas you can speak to it, and I've experienced it because I was in Division III and then I was at a Division II school when I played. When you're at a scholarship level school, there is no off season. You go from the season, a couple weeks off, to off season training, into spring, and then summer workouts, and you never get an opportunity to miss the game. And so I think that's another positive about Division III, is that you really get an opportunity to go, man, I can't wait until we do something football related that's like official again.
One of the really good things about, where I'm at is 100% the guys, they love the game. They miss the game. They're out there every single Wednesday and Saturday doing 7-on-7s with the whole team. O-line and D-line are out there. They're itching to get into football. They love the game. And I think you're right. In a lot of Division I, high atmospheres, those kids don't get that mental break from football, that pressure from the coaches, that off season, that disconnect that can be so valuable for players and coaches alike.
Yeah, definitely, because the idea that, well, the coaches can't be around, but the strength and conditioning coordinator can be around. I mean, come on, like that's the same. It's the same thing. The strength and conditioning coach is on the sidelines on a Saturday afternoon, the same way those assistant coaches are. So there's really no difference within the strength and conditioning coach being there versus an assistant coach being there, and they're all like looking out the windows anyway at what you're doing. So, who knows? Another thing that I think is an interesting part of Division III sports is the fluidity. Like, you really have to, when you come off of a summer, you really have to take inventory in who we have coming back, because, there's a lot of decisions that are made, and football is not the number one decision for these kids. Sometimes you have a kid, he's a really good kid, and then you find out, oh, well, he's not coming back because he can't afford it. So just talk about some of those things that you've seen that pop up at this lower level that you may not see, or at least that a coach would be aware of at a higher level.
Yeah, you get guys with a lot of multiple interests, where football might be, 1B instead of 1A in a list of priorities. And they might find something that, that they like more than the game if they're more interested in a club or something like that, or they want to study abroad instead of going to spring football. So you're going to have those different things pop up. I know in the past there's been stories of guys in a certain major, like an architecture major, in which they had a test on a Saturday in the fall, and they weren't able to do that. We had a long snapper, second last game of the year. He had an interview with Boeing in Seattle, and he had to miss the second to last game to go to that. He also got the job. He's an aeronautical engineer at Boeing. And when they took him for his interview, it wasn't an interview. They told him, hey, which office do you want? So it might have been worth it for Jimmer. Really happy that he did it. But those are probably an issue that the University of Florida doesn't have to deal with. So I almost think that it's a blessing in another way.
Yeah, I can remember the one time that a major Division I program had someone dealing with something, and it was is it Myron Roll, who was going for the Rhodes Scholar.
The Rhodes Scholar, yeah.
Yeah, but they had an alum to fly him from the interview back, and I think he actually made it back either in time or a little bit into the game. But obviously that's the that's the differences in level. RPI, tell us a little bit about RPI, because a lot of people don't know what RPI is or what they kind of specialize in. So just talk a little bit about RPI.
Yeah, so RPI stands for Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute. It's located in Troy, New York. It's the nation's oldest engineering school, and it is assembled from 5 different schools: a School of Business, School of Architecture, School of Sciences, School of Humanities, and the School of Engineering. About 5,500 undergrads and about 1,000 graduate students there, and it's one of the premier engineering schools in the country.
Yeah, and one of the things to remember for a lot of people is, you know, when you're talking about schools like RPI and you know, Union and some of these schools, obviously the quote unquote baby Ivies with Amherst and Williams and you know, you're talking about highly competitive schools to get into. And so what's some of the differences that you find, or some of the challenges and then some of the advantages that you find with coaching and having to recruit at RPI versus if you were recruiting at, say, like Hartwick or something like that? You know, no offense against Hartwick, but obviously much less stringent, you know, admissions at a school like that.
I think in some ways, especially compared to like a Division I school, is we do it backwards. You know, we have to look at the transcript and the test score before we watch the film, because it's a complete waste of time to watch film on a guy that can't get in. Okay, and that's literally 1/3 of the battle. Then you got to get them on campus. They got to have your major, especially at a school like RPI that's very niche based, where you're going to be within a select few majors. It decreases your pool even more. And then the last thing at the Division III level is your financial aid. So instead of scholarships, it's got to work out for the family in a money way. So they've got to check a certain amount of boxes before they can be a viable recruit. And then, of course, we want the best players in the world. You know, we want the best team. We want to field the best team. Our jobs are on the line just like anybody else's. And with that, you're also dealing with that small niche group. Those are highly coveted student athletes by every program in the country because they can play and they're smart. So looking at that, it's a really, really tough pool to get after, but advantage-wise, you're recruiting really, really good kids from all over the country, makes you a national brand, and they're kids who love football.
Yeah, and I would assume because you're recruiting kids who have really made academics a focus in their life. In a lot of ways, you're not really having to spend a lot of time focused on eligibility. Like, you're not worried about a lot of guys on whether or not they're going to be eligible to play. You're just really trying to help them continue to focus on, you know, getting to that degree that they're seeking. And so you still care about academics, obviously, as a coach, because you care about your kids, but you get an opportunity to focus on helping them achieve a goal rather than just trying to keep them eligible.
Absolutely. I mean, so we meet every single Monday, the day off that they have from college football, and we talk strictly about their academics and try to get them to any help resources that they might need. You know, at our program, we've had 100% job placement rate as the guys leave, and you know, hopefully I've influenced enough so they can hit me back with some cheddar for all the, you know, the influence and time I've put into their lives.
No, that's awesome. That's awesome. So tell me a little bit about the conference that you play in and the kind of like the battles that you go through every year, because you know your conference is one where there's kind of like a hierarchy. These particular programs are kind of always going to be toward the top. And the battles that you have in recruiting, because a lot of times you're recruiting similar players, similar talents who are interested in the same things.
Yeah, so we play in the Liberty League Conference, which is a primarily New York conference. And I will say that the conference has gotten better every single year that I've been there. And I think it's honestly one of the best conferences in the Northeast. So in our conference is RPI, where I coach at. Union, our rival, we played in the Dutchman Shoes Trophy game for over 100 years. We played Union. The Shoes have been around for about 50. Ithaca, very storied program, new to the conference. Hobart, always very strong. St. Lawrence in the North Country, they get into empty, sling the ball around. University of Rochester, another very good academic school, a school that we run into a lot academically because they have similar STEM programs and a good business school. And then we had the recent addition of Buffalo State as an honorary member into the conference. And that brings a whole different dynamic too, with the state school being in the conference there. So we got athletes out the wazoo, a bunch of good academic schools with different ranges. And, we're all in that one New York area where we all recruit heavily because we all have a ton of guys on our team from there.
Yeah. So like when you go to see a recruit, is there any time where you see another program there that you compete against and you go, we're gonna have some issues if they're interested in this kid, because you already know a lot about the kid and you know that they're going to be able to offer something that kid's really interested in? Yeah.
And it really depends on the kid's major too.
Mm-hmm.
So if we're recruiting a business kid, Hobart and Union and Ithaca come into play. If we're recruiting a STEM kid, the University of Rochester is going to come into play. And when we're on the road going into high schools, we see these guys a ton, especially because that's our more local areas. And different areas of New York travel better than others, and it depends on the major of the kid, but we definitely run into our conference a lot.
Now, the admission of Buffalo State, obviously that's a game changer, because state school, state funding, tuition and fees a lot less than the programs that these other historically, great programs, but come with some price tags. What do you think about that kind of blend, that kind of mixing of public and private? Because I know for me, I can remember when I used to attend Fitchburg State, and we were in the MASCAC, and the MASCAC was kind of separated into state schools and private schools. And just looking at it from a player, I didn't realize it. But then years later at Bridgeton, looking at it from a coach, I'm like, well, these people aren't even dealing with the same level of issues, because these guys can just get anybody to come to their school, and they can make it affordable for those kids, whereas these programs really have to be selective about the guys that they bring in, because like you said before, not only is it an academic issue, but then a lot of times it's a cost issue as well.
I love it. I love having the different dynamics of people. I think that's what, education is ultimately about. And you can see it on the football field too. Where I would complain and say, hey, Buff State can get anybody in, they're going to complain and say, hey, we can't ever get an engineering student. So we both have our ups and downs. And if you look at the Empire 8 conference where they came from, it's a half public, half private. Some years a public school wins, some years a private school wins. And everybody's going to look and say, hey, you have what I want and whatever. But when those teams play, it comes to awesome football games. RPI's last 3 games against Buffalo State have been absolute classics in all 3 of them. It's just a great dynamic clash. We used to have it at St. A's when St. A's would play AIC. You really have different dynamics of students, and it's awesome to watch them come together and play football.
Absolutely. And a good colleague of mine, Emery Hunt, who does a lot of the bowl games that are up there, every year with footballgameplan.com and through the ECAC that puts on a lot of those bowl games. We talk about it all the time. I'm going to get you out of here on this because I know we're close to time, but just talk a little bit about athletes at the Division III level, because I believe that there's this misconception that the athletes in Division III are just like so inferior that they could never, compete at a Division I level. And I always tell people, it's like, look, man, I was a 6'4", 195-pound receiver running a 4.5 40. Like I could have competed with anyone. I just happened to end up at a Division III school and then go to a Division II school because there was, when I came out, there was no promotion. I had no coaches that knew about helping and getting my name out there. And you get a lot of that, and then a lot of the game in Division III comes down to measurables when it comes to height and weight and things of that nature. So speak to the athleticism of the guys that you see at Division III level.
My favorite part about being a Division III coach, especially in the evaluation and recruiting aspect, is that I don't have to recruit bodies. I get to recruit football players. And if you got a person that says that, come to one of my practices and try to cover Vinny McDonald or Nick Smith. Go try to cover Andre Ross Jr. from Union. Go cover Will Gladney from Ithaca. Go look at Ali Marpet, who got drafted out of Hobart as the second round left guard. And go look at Andrew Franks, our kicker, who kicked for the Dolphins for 2 years. So I think it's a gross misconception. I think there's a big difference between the Division I size and speed from Division III, but I don't think the gap is as gaping as some people imagine it in their minds.
Yeah, I think for me, having been able to see like all spectrums, that the difference ends up being in the depth. Like you can find a receiver at Amherst that could be hella effective at UMass. But you can't find 5. And that's really where you see the difference at, is in the ability for the Division I level guys to be able to churn out player after player after player after player. Whereas Division III, you may have 1 or 2 guys that are really good, and then some other guys who are trying to figure it out. I mean, and no disrespect, but kind of similar to you, where you went through 4 years of college, and then in your 5th year it kind of clicked in, and then obviously you're more mature at that point. You understand the game better, but now you go out and you have, your best season. You're one of the the go-to people on a program. Whereas when you probably came in as a walk-on, the coaches were saying, oh well, he's a good kid. And then you went from being he's a good kid to, he's a valuable member of this team on Saturdays. And that happens a lot as well, where for us as men, we don't mature as fast as women. And so we have an opportunity to, as we get later on into our college career, to make a jump that nobody actually saw coming.
Absolutely. So one of my favorite things about our program is, we get to develop guys. They're going to be there for the full 4 years. And I think that's the true mettle of a coach. I think anybody can put together a great 11 or a great 22. But I think the true measure is how can you develop, 11 guys throughout 4 years. I think that's the measure of a coach.
Awesome, man. I 100% agree with you. It's been a great conversation. Nick Marcella, RPI, offensive coordinator. Nick, give everybody your social media, so if they want to follow you, see what you're doing. Anybody that's interested in possibly sending their young man to play at RPI.
For sure. Twitter at coach_Marcella, Marcella. And my email is marcen@rpi.edu for anybody interested in reaching out.
That's awesome. Did you beat your dad to social media? Is that why you're Coach Marcella?
In social media, I'll get him every single time. In hoop or cribbage, he'll still get me.
Oh yeah, of course. And that dude, I tell him we both have drank out of the same fountain of youth, because for him to be as old as he is, and we won't put him out there like that, but he's old.
Yeah, I mean, he coached Newt Rockne and Theodore Roosevelt at Bridgeton back in the day.
Absolutely. He's been around for things. I remember, he probably remembers back when they actually roamed with the Buffaloes. But no, like I was wondering that when I first saw, I was like, okay, so Nick is Coach Marcella, and like, you know, Rick is like some other name, and I'm just like, Nick must have beat him in social media. It's the only way. Like I always laugh at it because I look at different coaches and how they have to put their names. I've been on pretty much every social media platform since its inception, which is why I'm at Gene Clemens at everything. Like there's no, you know, it's very simple. And so I try to tell kids, I'm like, listen, I know you want to put your really like cool in your head, you know, name out there, but remember, people are trying to find you. So if you're like Star Killer 85, you know,
no, put your name on there.
No one knows who you are.
Put your name on there. We're trying to find you. Put your name on there. Put your GPA. Put your test score. Put what class you're in. That's good. I don't care about your stars.
Yes. Nobody cares about the stars. It's such a overrated thing. Nick, once again, I really appreciate it. Great conversation. Ladies and gentlemen, if any of you are interested in RPI, please reach out to Nick. If you're interested in any Division III program, I would tell you to do your research. There are such fantastic schools that get a bad stigma just because it's a Division III school. I can tell you this, on a game day, it's not going to matter. Those people are passionate on a game day. Those people are going to support your team and your kid. If you send them to a Division III school, they're going to get a fantastic education. Hella Networking, you heard Coach Marcella already tell you, they have 100% placement when kids graduate. There's not a lot of schools that can say they have 100% placement when kids graduate from the school. So the idea of sending your kid to a Division I college and university, if they're just that talented, you know what, that's great. But if you're trying to force them to a program that they're not necessarily built for, there are some really awesome options out there, and Division III should be a valuable option for a lot of parents and a lot of kids out there. So I encourage you to go out, do your homework. Don't just fall in love with a level, fall in love with a school. And for Quarantine Coaching Conversations, I've been Coach Gene Clemens. Make sure you follow me on all my social media at Gene Clemens. Make sure you like and subscribe to the YouTube channel, Coach Gene Clemens. We appreciate your support and everything that we do here. And until next time, y'all have a great one. Be safe. Love each other.